everyone. My name is Harriet and I work at Millennium Library. I'd like to introduce Jane Zoutman. Jane is a master gardener who will be talking to you today about garden ponds. Before we begin, I'd like to mention we have a number of online services that have gardening resources and information for the beginner to the expert gardener. This includes our RB Digital and Overdrive services for ebooks and e-audiobooks, and gardening e-magazines such as Gardening the Easy Way and Amateur Gardening. Browse and download ebooks and e-magazines using your Winnipeg Public Library card at winnipeg.ca/library. We also have a gardening info guide that contains links to a wealth of information and resources. Click on info guides on our website to find this and other helpful guides.
Hi, my name is Jane. I'm going to talk to you about gardening with ponds. Who am I? Well, I'm a master gardener. I'm a team leader for the ponds gardening at Fort White and all the other gardening too. I have gardened forever, feels like it, and currently maintain about 6 ponds, which I think I'm going to get rid of a few of them. Anyway, this is Casey. That is me, and he had a tendency to dig pits. This is the result of his efforts, and I decided to make a pond out of it. This is what it looks like now. Not bad, huh? I thought it looked all right, considering I put very little effort or money into it. Okay, so we're going to talk about how you start a pond and ideas for people who have one and might want to change. And why would you want to do this? It is a bit of work. Well, because you bring a whole new set of life into your garden. Birds, frogs. Believe it or not, I've had a frog turn up in the middle of my yard, move in for a couple of weeks, and then leave. Don't ask where he came from, where he went. I have no clue. But it's just part of the fun. And the birds stop. I get all sorts of birds, bees, dragonflies, all of them are interested in the pond. Your ponds can be little. If you want to just have a half barrel with a bit of rubber in it, and here's a hawk who comes by all the time, has a bath in my barrel. I have hummingbirds, I have warblers, all sorts of things, always coming for baths. The deer come by too. This is at the lake, and that deer, and honestly, a bear. I haven't got the pictures of the bear in here, but he was trying to take a bath in that one time. Great fun. This is a huge picture pond, but I have a friend who's got one just like this. And it is a clay bottom, and she has a stream that feeds it, and she's got all sorts of fish in there. It's really quite neat. Now, this is my backyard. Is it hard? These are the problems with setting up a pond. Some of the negatives. Can't be hard work. You got to put a bit of effort into it. It can cost. You got to buy pumps, liner, filters, rocks. I'll show you some cheap ways to do this. And there's the dreaded algae. We'll talk about getting rid of that too. And it does need to be cleaned up annually for the most part. It's smelly, dirty, no question about it. So what do you need? Well, you need a plan. I don't often bother, but that's me. A good location, a liner, a pump, and a net, fish, plants, logs, rocks, all of those things if you want them. It's up to you. Now, a plan. Well, things to consider are how large do you want the pond? What shape do you want? Now, my pond at home isn't very big. There it is right there. It's not very big at all. And it also is actually the low spot in my yard, so the water from the yard, if it gets really wet, a lot of rain drains right into it. What style do you like? You want a formal? I have a friend who's got a big rectangular pond with patio stones all around it. She grows wonderful water lilies and has goldfish too in it. Do you want a natural pond? Obviously, I go for the natural. What kind of a liner do you want? You can have rubber, or you can buy those preformed plastic things. I have the rubber. I like doing it that way. I can control everything. Or you can get plastic. Those plastic liners aren't horrible. Well, okay, I don't like them, but that's just me. Then you can, how to finish the edges. How do you want it to look? As you can see, I put rocks, logs, all sorts of things around mine. If you put logs, honestly, once they get really, really wet, they don't rot that quickly. You'd be surprised how long they last. Don't use pressure treated wood, whatever you do. You can have a stream, a waterfall. Here's my waterfall right there. I have both, or a beach area, which is a shallow area. The birds like that for the bathing. So, and then location. Sun works best because the plants that go in a pond are sunny plants. But try to avoid trees and roots and leaves would be nice, but I haven't succeeded in any of those things. I got an apple tree that's not hanging right over my pond at home. Oh well, I have to clean the pond a little more. How deep? Well, you'll find 24 inches is generally the rule. You can check with your municipality. I did with the city, 24 inches, unless you want to put a fence around it. This is Fort White's pond. This is one of the 2 ponds there, and it's 24 inches deep. Okay, you have to have access to electricity and water. Now, my pond, the pump needs the electricity. The cord on it is actually quite long, but I can reach with the cord, but I chose to put an extension on it and run it around. I put a PCV pipe and ran the pipe, the electricity, the plug and the water and the cords to the water through that, because I want to keep it safe and I don't want to hit it by accident. You also want it so you can see it. You know, you want to be able to look at this pond, be it water, be it by a window, be it off the patio. Now, the liner. Here's a really good example of the liner. There's, again, all sorts of choices. I prefer the 45 mil rubber. Watch out, there's cheaper versions of the rubber. They're horrible. They get stiff as a board. You can't do a darn thing with them. This is 45 mil rubber. They call it EPDM. I have no clue what it stands for. Anyway, that's what I recommend. Measuring your pond. That's actually, you know, you can sort of guess a little bit, but it's 2 feet down. This one I think is 8 feet across. I'm guessing could be 6, and then 2 feet up. Okay, so let's say it's 8. That's 12 feet. And then you can see I have quite a bit of overhang, and about 1.5 feet on this side and 2 feet on this side. There's the waterfall right here. I needed the extra to cover up and make sure the waterfall has got lots of rubber around. That's a good place for a leak. Every time I have a leak in a pond, that's where it is. So I have 2 feet on this side by the waterfall, and that gives me what I think I need. I built shelves, so you kind of got to give yourself a little extra for that, but I find an extra 2 feet on each side more than enough. The liner is quite heavy. I put it out in the sun before using it because it makes it nice and warm. This is April. You can see it's about this time of year, though. I think it was actually earlier because we cleaned that pond out. There was ice in it. I replaced the rubber. How long does this rubber last? I've got some that's 20 years old. This is Fort White's rubber, very hot, sunny spot. That rubber was about 17 years old. It was still doing it. It was starting to leak. Next, a pump. You need a pump. This is a little giant pump. I like these ones. I've got one doing in my pond right now. That's the intake, and there the water shoots out here. You can do all sorts of different things with what you want to do with that. And this just cuts it off, but that's actually the power cord. Okay, the cost, so you can get them for $60, but that's probably $200 pump. How big a pump do you need? It's called gallons per minute. That's the flow through of the pump. And there's a formula. Online, you can find it. Go to Shell Meridians, they'll give you a worksheet. You just give the dimensions of your pond, and from that, it'll figure out what size pump you need. This is not a big pump. You don't want to overdo it. It'll shoot the water way too hard. You could even screw onto here a little extension that has a little lever on it. We can slow down the flow. You may need to do that. You'll need a hose. The hose is stiff and annoying. It's the worst piece of the whole thing, but they're bendable. You learn to play with it. You learn to warm it up before you play with it. And how much do you need? Again, figure out where it is. You need the hose. I use about 8 feet in my pond. One of the ones at Victoria Beach. I say the Fort White, I think it's 12 feet is for the biggest of the ponds, because I'm actually working from the opposite side of the pond. You need to be able to get up to your waterfall. You need some slack so you can pull it up and clean it. So I find 8 feet is pretty much the minimum. Put the pump where it is accessible, where you can get at it, because you're going to have to clean it once in a while. It's also where you can hide your hose and cord. More on that. Filters, you can buy them. They usually go with your waterfall, and they're part of the waterfall. I don't buy them. I'm too cheap, and I don't see any huge need. Meet my filter. Cat litter container. I have a cat. Hose, pump, bungee cord, screen. You stick the pump, attach the hose to the outlet. That's that little piece there. Stick it in there. Put the cord and the hose together. Stick a piece of screen over top. A bungee cord's wrapped around there to hold everything together. It's got to be good and tight, the bungee cord. And there you go. That's what I sink in my pond. And the result is just fine. Do I have to clean this? Yeah, not often. Last year, I put it in April. I cleaned it. When did I clean it? Don't think I cleaned it till September. I might have pulled it out once and given it a hope. What happens is gunk gets on the screen. And how much gunk depends upon what is in your pond. I have goldfish. And so they leave a bit of gunk behind, and a bit of things fall in, and the pump sucks it all and it all ends up sitting on top of that screen. So as that screen gets gunky, the whole water flow diminishes. You'll see it, it's obvious. At that point, you really should pull it out and take the screen off, give it a good rinsing, give the pump a good rinse, and just put it back in. I don't do it often. Honestly, I don't. Unfortunately, at Fort White, I have to do it a little more often. Most ponds don't have to deal with Canada geese and mallards swimming around in them, and let me tell you, they make a mess. So then I have to do it a whole lot more often, but it's the same system I use at Fort White. Here's one of the ponds at Fort White. So how do you dig a pond? Well, you dig a hole. Not complicated, but as you can see, the hole is a whole lot bigger on the outside than on the inside. That is on purpose, otherwise, boy, would you have a lot of clay to get rid of. You can see nice yellow gumbo, typical Manitoba stuff, wonderful for ponds. So you dig a hole. You can sculpt it sort of. Here I have an open area here. It's kind of deeper, a little sort of a pot. Great, huge shelf. If you big shelves like this, lean them slightly backwards. This should be lower. Oh, I did it again. Sorry. This should be lower than that. So the plants don't slowly wander their way into they do. And I think the goldfish help, but anyway, in other words, just keep it lower so that if you make a shelf, that's a huge shelf. Most of the shelves aren't that big. This is a shelf where I put a log on later on. And this is our waterfall. And what did I use to build the waterfall? Well, rocks are heavy and hard to come by. So we just made a big mound of dirt. We made it smaller later. That was a really large mound of dirt. We were experimenting with rocks. Anyway, so keep in mind, you want to hide the rubber. It's not that bad a deal, hard to hide the rubber, but you know, we leave a little ledge here near here where the rubber goes over and up to this here, and this allows us to put some rocks down to hide the rubber, so that even if the water level goes down a couple inches, you still can't see rubber. I don't like seeing rubber. So plan as you dig, see what you've got, in your soil. If you run into a tree root, well, it may have an oddball shape. Keep your soil. That clay is wonderful for putting the plants in. You don't want to use soft soil, nice soil for that. Pond plants should be in clay, if you can do it. Now, what do you need to do? Well, you saw the bottom, right? Landscape fabric along the bottom before you put in your rubber. I use old mats. They're thicker and stronger than the landscape fabric, and that works just fine, and I seem to collect them. I have dogs. Anyway, what else? When you're putting the liner in, fold it up, put it in a warm, sunny spot to warm it up, and then fold it up, put it in, and work it into the corners. Here, I'll show you the next picture. This is us working it into the corners. We put down the rubber, the mats underneath, put the rubber in, and then here we even put the gravel in. You should put gravel in the bottom. It protects the rubber. It also helps good for the plants, but it should be round stones, not limestone chunks. It's too sharp, and the limestone will pollute. You can see our collection of rocks. Let me tell you, they lost a lot of rocks along their lake edges. This was me foraging for rocks. There's my son. Why did I borrow my son? By the way, he's not a gardener, but I needed a bit of muscle power. That hunk of rubber is heavy. Me and Lynn aren't very big or particularly strong. Brenda's very strong. So between the four of us, we managed to get it into the pond. It was heavy though. And you can see us, there's that waterfall. You can see us working it in, folding it flat. And then what we did next was start putting in the water. We put the water in slowly and checked and pulled and prodded. And here it is. This is after it got all filled up, all dirty and mucky, not looking particularly nice yet. Just give it time. So this is a cattail I dug out of the ditch. It's sitting in a container similar to what the pump is sitting in, another cat litter container or a dog biscuit container or some pail from the restaurant. This is Fort White. Here's that shelf, and here are a few of the plants. It's full of plants now. This is a few of them. That's another part of the shelf. We put some great huge logs in. Those same logs are still there. This was a few years ago. They're fine. Another pot. You can see the edges of the pot there. Great big pot, a tree pot, I think. We put some cattails again. We dug up. Now here's the pump. I got the pump going because that will get the water to clear up. And you can see the cord, and there's the hose. I didn't try to get fancy. It's just there and running. There's that waterfall, and you can see the water shooting out there. I cut very little rubber. Every time I cut rubber, I always regret it. I kept the rubber as solid as I could. I tuck in the corners where what I don't need. The great fun is trying to bury it so you can't see it. But you can see I have rocks in front. Then I'll have rocks leaning out over these rocks. I had a lot of rocks to choose from, so I had a lot to go from. Anyway, this is how, you want to see what it looks like now? How's that? That's it. Remember those two big logs? There they are. They got some stuff, weeds growing in them now. That's just earlier in the season still. And did you look at that? Isn't that a beautiful water lily? That thing lasted for years. They do get frozen if we get a hard winter. We didn't have a hard winter this year, so I'm hopeful. And he had 35 flowers one time when he got even bigger. It's just amazing. And this is that waterfall. You can see how it works. And this is my log. Why? This log hides the hose. I know this sounds stupid, but that hose is stiff and hard to get rid of. Here's my plastic pail. And there is the pump with a piece of screen over top. You can see it's getting a little goopy already. And here comes the hose up, up. Oh, I'm wrong. That's probably the power cord. There's the power cord. That actually is our power box there. It comes up, up, up under the branch. There it is going again. And then it comes around here. Normally you can't see it. I try hard for that you can't see where it is. But on purpose, I left it so you can see it a little bit on this one. And this is the garden around the pond. We have swamp milkweed for the butterflies, and we attract all sorts of bees, butterflies, and all sorts of things. And fish. See, there are the goldfish. Unfortunately, I am not doing goldfish at Fort White. The minks keep eating them. I'm not providing dinner for the minks, so I gave up. Now, finishing the edges is often the hardest thing to do. This is that other pond you saw with just the rubber around it. What I did was we built a little shelf as we were going. So under this big, huge flat rock here, that was a real fine, that one, is some smaller rocks sitting on a little shelf. And so it leans out over the water, and that way the water can go up and down by a couple of inches. And this is also cattails in a pail. Don't forget, if you're going to use miscellaneous pails like I tend to do, make sure there's at least a few holes in it. I just get the drill a few holes in it, and works fine. More pails and plants were on a shelf that's along here. The waterfall's over here, but you can't see it for all the greenery. And this pond takes a bit of a beating. It's actually, this is the downspout from the roof of the Fort White Interpretive Center. And in a good rainstorm, you wouldn't believe how much water comes through this. It ends up all in the pond. So there's not much that's loose in this pond. That thing has been knocked over by the force of the water. There's a stream at the other end where it overflows into the parking lot. Best I could do. Anyway, you'll have to use your imagination as to how to hide the rubber as best you can. But as you can see, it's not that hard. Rocks, smaller ones, actually are quite useful. Make sure you realize it is water, it is rubber. You gotta keep in mind that water will overflow unless you will overflow. This pond overflows regularly just because we get the rain. And also I say cut off the excess rubber. Be careful with that. I try to cut off the minimum. Now, this is my pond in the backyard about 2 days ago. As you can see, here's my cat litter container. The screening, you can't really see, but it's there. And the pump hose is coming up here. The power one is coming with it. This is what the stick's doing. It's basically holding the hose. It's cold out there. The stupid hose will not soften up and sink down. It will when it warms up. It's just not doing it right now. So I stuck the stick over top. It works. I stuck a rock on top of the stick, and the result is it's staying put. As you can see, my goldfish think this is quite fascinating. There's 15 goldfish in there. I've had these goldfish for 20 more years. And of course, the first generation is gone. This is about the third generation or so. They live a long time. You'd be surprised. Now, this is my waterfall, and it's just some flat rocks. When you get the pump, as I said before, don't overdo the size of the pump because it will shoot the water all the way across. Just big stream, shoom, right there. Don't need that. I have to try to keep it so that it's just running nicely like that, and I put some stones in front of it to slow it down so it's flowing the way I want it to look. Watch out with spatters like this because it'll make the water level in your pond go down. This, by the way, and the one on the other corner there, is a marsh marigold which is about to bloom. Dug it out of the ditch on Highway 59. That's where a lot of my plants. That's where the cattail right here came from too. Yeah, well, I'm a cheapskate. So be careful with plants because that's next. This one is overdone. You know that pond that we saw a little while ago at Fort White? That's the offflow from the, yeah, that's this. This is when I started working there. This is what I found. Great fun. Anyway, cleaned it up. Looks much better now. What kind of plants do you want? This is hornwort. You can buy it at St. Mary's, Shelmerdines, and maybe Jensen's. They sometimes have stuff. A bunch like this costs you maybe $10, and one bunch like this I can do 3 ponds with. I know I don't put much in there. I take it, divide it into 3, collect it all up and put a elastic string, zip tie with a nut, a heavy nut, so it will sink. It's tied to it. and then just drop it in the pond. By August, you're pulling it out by the handful because it really does grow. This is what it looks like close up. They use it in aquariums for fish. Anyway, cornwort, that's an important one. It's an oxygenator. It'll keep your water fresh, and it'll keep the algae down too, because it'll keep the oxygen levels up in your water. This shade is another good thing that you need in your pond. It saves your fish a little bit. Also, it keeps the algae down. The algae you'll find grows in the really hot, sunny locations. This is, you've seen this, duckweed. It's that green stuff that's all over the ponds, you see. It's actually the smallest vascular plant there is. We grow it right here in Manitoba. It's got little leaves and itty bitty teeny roots. Really kind of a neat plant. And it will take over if you give it a chance. But it's very easy just to clean it up with a net, throw it in your garden. It breaks down very quickly. It does a lovely job of keeping the pond a little bit cooler. This is water lettuce. Works. You grow this at home. You get 1 or 2 of these. You'll have a dozen of them in a month. They spit out babies. Anyway, it's really quite nice. Doesn't do anything. Just that floats around. Mind you, I can't grow it at Fort White. They loved eating it, the geese and the ducks. So I don't. But at home I have it. Water hyacinth you might be able to get. They say it is invasive. It's not invasive here. It's a tropical plant. It does not make it through our winters. That's a bit of nonsense, but I can't do much about that. So you may not actually find it. It's a good, nice plant too. It has purple flowers when it gets going good. Now, marginal plants. These are the plants that you grow along the edges. So we have sinking plants, we have floating plants, and now we have marginal plants that grow along the outside. Now, this is Mother's Day. Yeah, I know. Everybody gives me plants. So this is some of the plants that work very well. You can have a corkscrew rush. They'll live through the winter. You can have water irises. The yellow ones are also considered invasive, but the blue ones you can buy, and they're really nice too. They will grow there too. This is a banana plant. This is a cypress or a papyrus, whatever they want to call it. This is taro. Obviously, they won't survive our winters. And this was a canna lily, and that actually will grow in water too. So there are all sorts of plants you can grow along the edges. That's why you need your shelves of the garden. Water lilies are expensive. You won't find anything less than $35, and they will survive, but only if our winters are mild. As you're planting, use heavy soil. Don't use that light fluffy stuff. It'll float away. If you want, I honestly don't even transplant them. I leave them in the pots they're in and just huck them in. Sounds awful. And you'll need stones if you do decide to transplant stuff to hold everything down. Because again, it's water. Things float away. Now these plants should be, they'll tell you on them labels, but they should basically be sitting in water up to their top of the pot, not much further. You can't see it, but under this log, there's some when I put the plants in, they go there. It's a shallow place, and they can all, the feet are wet, but the rest of the plant is dry. That works very well for most of these plants. Here, the same plants a few months later. That's that taro plant. Look at it, it's huge. And here's the banana plant. This was a year I had never had so many plants in my life in my pond. And this is the papyrus or the cypress, long with frilly things top. That one you can overwinter, but I don't recommend doing it. And most of them are sitting behind there. These ones are sitting on the shelves. You can see the pots here. But I had to tie, you can see, I don't know if you can see the string there, but I had to tie this one down. Believe it or not, these goldfish kept pushing it into the pond. Yeah, they do things like that. And this is my water lily. It was a little overdone that year. I got a little carried away. Part of the fun. And fish. Well, as you can have seen already, I have goldfish. I have 15 of them right now. I've had up to 40. They will breed if they're in a large enough pond, Fort White. And you can put in frogs. You saw some of the other ponds I had frogs. Koi cost more. They will also reproduce, and they live a long time. And the fish can be quite tame. I stand over my pond and yell, fishy, 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 and they all come running for food. Okay, come swimming. It's quite funny. There we go. And here are the frogs. I have a whole colony of frogs. What I did was I went hunting. This is at the cottage. I went hunting for tadpoles and snails. Found them in sort of a swampy area. Put them in here. I've had them ever since. Great fun. In the wintertime, I don't do anything. The frogs are fine. If I have minnows, I return them to where I found them. The goldfish, I have to catch them. I have a friend who's a gardener and also has a pond. She treats her goldfish like annuals. I said, well, say no more. You can figure out maybe you know what she means by that. Anyway, the dreaded algae. Be careful. You bring stuff in like I do from other places. You sometimes pick stuff up. Huh. I try not to do that. I have a net at Fort White. I have a net at home. I don't use this. Don't cross those two. Just put, if you find algae in your pond, just keep pulling it out. Pull it out with the net. You will win. You will get rid of it eventually. The frogs, the fish, the tadpoles, whatever you have in it will help because they'll eat it. So, but it grows very fast. But there is a trick. It's called barley. You can get barley straw in little bales. You can get pellets in a bag. You can get liquid. I prefer the pellets. I've tried the straw. That worked fine. Can't find it anymore. Pellets work fine. The liquid is annoying because you have to put it in on a regular basis, and honestly, it costs a whole lot more. So pellets. Shelmerdines, St. Mary's Nursery, both have them. You buy a bag. It'll cost you $25, but one bag lasts me 3 years. There's a bag in the bag, and you put the pellets in that bag. It's a black meshy bag. You put it in the pond, bury it, just stick it under a rock somewhere in a corner where it just won't float around. And honestly, it changed. My understanding is it changes the chemistry in the water, the pH. Algae doesn't like it, and it really does work. So I get one bag at Shelmerdines for about $25. I don't read the directions. I'm not grand for reading directions. And it usually lasts me about 3 years. I've got the last of the bag that I'm going to use this year. I just empty the bag into my compost bin after I pull it out, and I only pull it out in the spring. Let the bag dry, which is what it's doing right now. I will fill it up afterwards, tie the bag close again, and sink it under a rock in my pond. I might wait for that because the water is really cold. Pond maintenance. Well, during the summer, you will have to top up the water, and you may have to pull up the pump and give it all a good rinse, and then just put it back. After Thanksgiving, usually catch your fish, put them in the aquarium, pull up your pump, give it a good cleaning, and bring it into a heated air. You can't leave them outside. Your $200 pump will be killed by being left out and freezing. You can't do that. I leave the hose behind, though. That's about it. The worst of the job is April, May, where you have to drain the pond to clean it. It's really good stuff for your lawn and garden. I just aim it at the garden, take the hose, aim it at the garden, aim it at the lawn. If that doesn't work, I stick an extension on it for a piece of downspout or something, and it all ends up in there. You go to clean up the bottom, the goopy, smelly, stinky stuff, put on gardening gloves. It filters most of the worst of it out. I know they get wet, but it really does keep most of the stink off your hands. Lemon juice wash, it gets rid of the stink. Refill your pond. I usually drain it a second time. I don't fill it all the way to the top. Most of the way, just pump it all out again so it looks good and clean. And then I wait at least a week or so before adding the fish. Boy, are they happy to get out there. This is my fish in the wintertime. You can imagine why they like to get back out into the pond. And there we go. I've never found any great books on this, but The Prairie Water Garden by Paul Harris and Terry Watke is not bad. This is the pond, that pond we were looking at before at Fort White. Thank you. I hope you learned something, and goodbye.
Thank you again, Jane. That was so enjoyable. Rest assured, garden ponds will increase in popularity after watching your presentation. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as visit us at winnipeg.ca/library.